Now we're going to take off this neck, and this is a part that is a lot of people struggle with, but I'm going to come back here, right behind the last vertebrae there, and we'll turn this around. We're going to cut through in front of the first rib and kind of get right down to the joint. We're not going to cut through the bone with our knife here. And again, this is something that I know where that joint is and I can get it off of there, but for the average person starting out, we're going to do it the easy way. Kind of push the whole thing towards me a little bit. One more. Okay. Okay, we got our neck up here now. In this part where we cut the head off, I'm going to trim away a little bit of that. So one thing we need to do with the neck is we need to remove the windpipe and the esophagus. And so I'll do that next here. I've got some bloody area down here. I'm going to get rid of that. There's always a few of these small glands in here. Trim those off. Now if you like to prepare a neck roast, this is probably too big. And you can cut it in half the same way that we took it off. I think a half of that would be a pretty good neck roast. Or you can bone it out, which is what I think is going to happen. Now we're going to take the meat off the outside of the rib cage. I'm bending my knife in against those bones, making that knife blade flex a little bit while I'm doing that. So the guys on the boning table can trim this up. And if they want to save the tallow, they can do that. If, for example, I was going to work on this piece, I would cut it off like this. And then there's a piece of fat laying on top. That would go in the tallow part. Same thing with this on the bottom. Then I got my lean that goes over here. And you can work through this whole flank in that same manner. My son and his friend are taking this deer tonight and they're going to finish up on the trimming, so I'm just going to put that whole thing in their gift basket here. Now to get rid of the rest of our carcass here, I'll take this apart at the joint, and if you look here, hopefully I can get enough meat away from that joint where you can really see it good. It'll come right off. Then we've got this hip section here to trim up. Okay, and I'm going to take this one off as well. And I can see the joint right here. This will break a little harder, but it will come apart. Okay, I'm going to use my boning hook again. Now, you'll see the gambrel that we use, and we make this one, is a little narrower than a normal gambrel, but it's got these long, I call them ears on them. And right now is the reason that we build them that way. I'm going to take that leg off, and the other leg will still hang there. Now we're going to remove this hindquarter from the pelvis bone here. And again, we study our opening of our pelvic opening there, and the ball and socket joint is at the upper end of that on each side. You just go slow until you see that ball and socket opening up. And that is tied to the joint with a big ligament, which I just cut through. The labrum is what that is. Now just carefully ride the bone with your knife. This is where the flexible knife really is a benefit. Okay. And no matter how good a job was done field dressing, I still think it makes sense to clean this hindquarter up. So I get right underneath that layer there with my knife and come out here. And it's just like skinning it is what it is. Because that part is carrying some of that load of contamination that I talked about before. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Now we can talk about how to do this hindquarter. I'll turn it this way so you can see it. You locate your ball of your femur bone, your leg bone, and coming out on the small side you'll see a natural seam. So we're going to cut right through that. Okay. Then we'll go, the leg bone runs from the ball down to the knee joint, and we'll come in here like this and ride that bone until you feel the knee bone down here. And when you feel that knee bone, you come to the outside and make a cut. And you can see what I did. I stayed right on the bone all the way. And then you can just remove this. This is your sirloin tip, and it's inside of a silver skin. And so I always take that off. There's a little bit of lean that comes with that silver skin, so I'll let the guys who are trimming this up. And I really do like this piece of meat. It's not the most tender piece in the round. It, for example, is not a good piece to use for cube steaks because it's got too many cords run through it. But to do like a beef tip recipe over noodles or just a regular venison roast where you're going to let it cook for a couple hours, it's excellent. I always like to cut this in half. It makes me feel good to look at how nice that looks. You can see the little cords in there, but wow, what a gorgeous piece of meat. All right, now we're getting into the really goodies here. The top round, I got a little bit of stuff I'm going to take off here. Lays above the leg bone. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go in about 1 inch deep around the top of that leg bone with our knife. And once we get just around the bone a little bit, then we're going to go straight down until we find this natural seam. And there it is. That's your top round. And it's got a kind of a loose muscle laying on the top, but I always take that off. That goes in trimmings. And we can take this little layer of fat off in here. Now, as opposed to the sirloin tip, the top round is an excellent candidate for making cube steaks, Swiss steak. If you make Philly steak sandwiches where you slice the meat real thin and then grill it, it's excellent for that. The grain all lays one way, It's just wonderful. If I make smoked venison, this is the piece I use for that, where I inject it with brine and then smoke it and then slice it after it's chilled down. It's just great. Leave that out for you to look at there. Okay, now we're going to take the bottom round off. And on the bottom round, you see this piece that almost looks like the tenderloin on the side. That is the eye of the round. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you can broil that like a tenderloin, because you can't. It's a toughie, but there are some good uses for it. And let's take that off first. And then we can take the fat off of it there. Okay, one way it's really good is for a steak and eggs, breakfast steak. And if you use that jacquarding tenderizer and cut it a little less than a ½ inch, about 3/8 inch thick, and fry it in butter, you'll be real happy with it. It's a great piece. But like I say, about the same shape as your tenderloin, but there's a lot of difference in the tenderness there. I'll put it over here by this. Okay, now we're going to get the bottom round off of here. And so you see that shank meat there. I'm going to go right alongside of that. I'll lift the leg bone up in the air, and we'll just start boning around the leg bone here. Okay. Now you see this is kind of L-shaped, and right in here I'm going to separate the bottom round from the sirloin. Okay? And the sirloin is often overlooked on a deer, and I cut up a lot of deer before I started paying attention to the sirloin, but the sirloin is a wonderful piece of meat. You can be just as tender as your back straps. You can broil it. I usually leave some of the fat on here because it helps me identify which cut it is. And then I'll just mark it as sirloin on my vacuum bags. And you can take the rest of that fat off when you defrost it. But the sirloin is, we had it the other day as tips, and it was just excellent. I don't know how you'd improve on it. A little more tender than the sirloin tip, but. And then your bottom round. On the bottom round, you always have the star fat, which you want to get out of there, because inside of that is another one of those glands. I'm not going to cut through it, but trust me, it's there. And now you have this extra muscle on this side. I always put that in the trimmings. And then you got a pretty thick silver skin here. It's a good idea to get that out of there. It doesn't really look any thicker than the one that's on the back straps, but trust me, it's a lot tougher. And then we can take the fat off of it. There's your bottom round. Then you just have to bone out this hind leg. The first piece of that shank comes off there real easy. Let's get rid of that. And again, that's excellent for canning. Another meat that's really good for canning is that neck meat. It's got more connective tissue in it that melts away when you do the pressure cooking and really helps the eating quality of it. When you get to this part of the hind leg, there's one piece of the gristle in the shank that's almost like a turkey spine in a turkey leg. And you want to make sure that that doesn't get included in your trimmings. And that's it right there. Now, I know that there are guys that do this much more expertly than I do, and a lot faster. And I take my hat off to them. It's great. They do it for a living. The issue that I have with when they demonstrate it is they go so fast you can't follow it and you can't learn. That's what I've tried here to do today, is to take you through it step by step, show you the parts that I've found to be important, and when you end up with this kind of result, I think you'll be happy, I think your family will be happy, and you'll feel better about your hunting experience.